Welcome to the home team, the show where no matter who you root for, here you're a part of the home team. And in this video, we will be breaking down the head coaching vacancies as well as the candidates and sort of playing matchmaker in a sense. I wanted to wait to do this video till after the divisional round because sometimes when certain teams are eliminated there's the chance that a team makes a change. And I felt that there were a couple jobs where that was possible. And I know that 2 of these jobs have been taken, and I will still give a breakdown of what I thought about those and the candidates that went to them. But before jumping in, hit like, hit subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And without any further ado, let's do this. So, there were, at the end of everything coming out here, there were 7 head coaching jobs that became available, which were the Patriots, Bears, Cowboys, Jags, Jets, Raiders, and Saints. Who knows? Maybe somebody else will make a change in the coming days and weeks, but it doesn't seem super likely at this point. And I went about sort of trying to decide how I would rank these jobs, and I came to essentially a grading scale, so it's on a scale of 1 to 5, where I break down the roster, the ownership, the cap space, draft pick, division, and then the market and brand that they're in. Also in that ownership thing, that also sort of includes the front office situation. So it's just everything that's sort of everybody's cutting the checks in essence. So Patriots and Bears, they are spoken for at this point. Obviously, Mike Vrabel has gone to the Patriots. And then basically right before I sat down to record this video, it was announced Ben Johnson is going to the Chicago Bears. So I'm going to really quickly here run through what I thought of those jobs and those candidates. In terms of the candidates, I also broke it down into a scale of 1 to 5, where I went through and tried to evaluate, at least in my opinion, their experience, their connections, X's and O's specialty, and how desirable that is in the modern NFL, leadership, and then upside. And then at the end, I have a few sort of surprise or out-of-the-box candidates. All right, so let's break down the Patriots and Bears real quick, shall we? So the roster for the Patriots, gave it a 2. The only reason it's not a 1 is because they have Drake May, and you're not going into this season and probably next offseason at least thinking that you need to be looking for a quarterback. He showed a lot of promise in his rookie year, despite the fact that they're in like a really difficult situation roster-wise. The fact that he didn't completely crumble, I think, speaks a lot to his talent and his potential. Ownership, gave him a 4. I know some people would say the Crafts have been a little bit hasty and probably hung on a little bit too long. And I think you could even argue that going with Mike Vrabel is a sign of they still want to try to keep things somewhat the same as it was during their dynasty run, which can sometimes be a little bit dangerous. However, they have shown that in terms of when the coaching is right and when the roster is right, they're clearly an ownership group that understands how to facilitate a 20-year run of excellence, including essentially 2 dynasty runs. So they're not an ownership group where you have to wonder, is it even really possible for us to win with this group? It clearly is possible. Cap space, that's a 5. That's a 5 out of 5 right there. The Patriots have the most effective cap space in the league. If you're wondering what effective cap space is, I use a website called Over the Cap, and it's essentially, it factors in what it's going to take to, pay a draft class and things of that nature, because sometimes you see just that normal number and it's a little bit inflated because there are things that have to be built in before you can actually look at the money you can spend. And the Patriots have the most effective cap space in the league with $112.7 million. Draft pick, gave it a 5, 4th overall pick. I know having the 1st overall pick would have been nice for the options. However, at least 2 of the teams ahead of them will take a quarterback, or at least in all likelihood. And as a result, they're likely to still get the player that they've deemed the best in this draft, or the most necessary to this team. They're still going to get a player that they would have really wanted. Division, gave it a 4. Not the most difficult division in the world. Really, the only drawback is Josh Allen and the Bills are in there. You should feel pretty confident that you can overcome the Jets and Dolphins. And I would say that, it sucks to have to compete with Josh Allen. Only having one team that's a perennial contender in the division, you can't be too scared of that. Market and brand, I give that a 5. Boston, it's one of the most famous, passionate, and engaged sports markets in the world. Then the brand of the Patriots. In the last 20, 25 years, they've become one of the more premier brands in the NFL. And there's a lot to be gained from being in that market and having that Patriot logo on the side of your helmet. So in total, I gave the Patriots a 25 out of 30. And then the Chicago Bears roster, I gave them a 3. I think that they're in a better position. They're a little more shaky on the quarterback front. I don't think that any reasonable person would sit here and say that Caleb Williams can't be great. But you'd also have to be honest and say that the rookie year probably didn't go how they hoped. Obviously, Ben Johnson thought highly enough of him to hitch his wagon to this job, but I would say that's a little iffy. I think that the offensive skill positions, they're in a decent place. Rome Odunze, DJ Moore will probably be the receivers next year. Keenan Allen likely won't be there. And then defensively, linebackers in a good spot, and then I like their corners and safeties. So I think the secondary is good, but the trenches need to get better for the Bears. And with the combination of we don't know what the quarterback situation really is yet, to the trenches on both sides aren't good. We're not super sure about running backs. I gave him a 3. Ownership, 2. And part of this is because of the front office thing, which is they fire Eberflus, they keep Ryan Poles. Now, does that mean Ryan Poles is a bad GM? No. But I need to know organizationally, are me and this GM on the same schedule? Because if he's on the hot seat right now and Ben Johnson's got time, then you're looking at just like alternating between these spots. And that's a bad place to be in. There needs to be unity. I would imagine the Bears have sold Ben Johnson on that because he seemed to be willing to be pretty picky about it. So I would imagine that they've at least told him that that's what it is, but time will tell. I just think it's odd whenever you have this situation. There's another team where we're in that situation. Cap space. That's another 5 out of 5 right there. Bears are top 10 in cap space. 7th, in fact, with $54.5 million to spend. Draft pick, they have the 10th overall pick, which is a 4. In other drafts, this would be a 5, but this is a draft that's not considered particularly deep in terms of blue chip talent. And while somebody could slide, in fact, somebody does every year, in a draft like this, it's a little bit tougher. So I'd say that they're in a good position, but they're not guaranteed to get the kind of guy that they want. But so it's a 4. Division, that's a 1. This is a tough division to be in. Not necessarily because you would say, oh, the Packers, Vikings, and Lions are all going to be good for 15 years and we have no shot. But I would say the Packers, in all likelihood, will at least be relevant most years. They just understand how to win. The Lions and Vikings, it's a little bit different. They're a little more hit and miss, and the Lions usually miss. But when it comes to when you're selecting a job in the NFL, usually the judgment on these jobs comes around the 3rd year. That's usually when ownership makes a decision. I don't know if the Lions and Vikings can be good for 15 years, but I do believe they could be good for another 3 years, which could put you in a tough spot if you're taking this job. Then the market and the brand. Once again, classic like history team, pillar team of the NFL. Great city in terms of fans and just size. So this is a 5 for the Bears, which brings them to a 20 out of 30. In terms of those two jobs, I thought the Patriots job was the most desirable job in the whole cycle because you have a high pick, you have all the money in the world, not a ton of horrible contracts on the roster, and you believe you have the quarterback settled. And I think that when it comes to that, it's like that's about all you can ask for in terms of rebuilding a job. Not to mention, in the case of Mike Vrabel, he has a pre-existing relationship with the Crafts, and they will give him time. So I would say that was the most desirable job. Bears, I had it somewhere. It would have been number 2 for me, like slam dunk, if I just knew what that front office and ownership was thinking in terms of timeline. But that makes me a little bit nervous. But overall, I believe that I had this job as the 3rd best job to get. So I like that a lot. And the one I have as the 2nd best is sort of a similar situation, but they also have a weird quirk about them too. So up next is the Dallas Cowboys. So roster, I gave them a 4 here. Whether or not we want to like it, the Cowboys are a talented bunch. CeeDee Lamb, is obviously a great wide receiver. Micah Parsons, premier defensive player in the league. They have a couple other young guys. Overshown, the linebacker, is a quality young linebacker. They have good corners. They all just dealt with injuries at the wrong times this year. They could never get on the field, and it caused them to have a bad year, frankly. Whether or not you believe in Dak Prescott is a big deal here, but frankly, whoever takes this job, that's your quarterback. I think that there's a lot of rumors out there about who would want the Cowboys job, how desirable is it, and I think a lot of that comes down to this next category, which is ownership. In terms of ownership, I am once again giving the Cowboys a 4. Here's the reason why. You could argue it's lower. I understand that. But Jerry Jones is good at talent acquisition, especially through the draft. When the Cowboys draft somebody, they have an eye for talent. They've done a good job there. Where they fall short, though, is obviously the circus. And whoever takes this job will go in knowing that that's the deal. But the Cowboys also, for the most part, they've been a relevant, good team. Obviously, there's the running joke of them never making the NFC Championship, and that's fair. But he clearly provides an environment where there's the potential to have multiple 12-win seasons in a row, which is more than you can say for a lot of these teams. So I would say the ownership is a 4, despite how quirky they are. Cap space. Now, that's not awesome. Cap space is where we have a 2, where they are 26th in effective cap space. So they are at the bottom of the league. I believe as of right now they're actually under, or they're actually like over the limit. So they have to do some dancing there. It's not going to be an offseason where they can bring in a bunch of people. It's going to have to be you retain and extend guys to try to fix your cap situation. And then from there, you know, we start building to the future through the draft. And the Cowboys are going to start making selections on who gets to stay and who has to go. So that's not awesome for Dallas. Draft pick, I gave that a 4 for them. They have the 12th overall pick as well. Anything in that sort of 9 to 15 range, 10 to 15 range, I would say that's probably like your range of number 4 guys, like the 4 grade there. And then division, that's a 2. Here's the main reason. The NFC East, the winner tends to cycle. Like, it tends to, like, there's not necessarily a juggernaut in the division year in, year out. Philadelphia is always well run by Howie Roseman, and they're always going to field a competent team in all likelihood. Washington, Jaden Daniels now is apparently going to be a force in this league for a while, which before the year we didn't know, but going into this offseason, that's something that has to be accounted for. And then the Giants, a little bit of a mess, but I believe that the Giants are eventually just going to have to hit the reset button. I think that they're going to try like hell to get a quarterback this year, and we'll see how it goes. But at least 2 out of the other 3 teams in the division you look at as being dangerous for a while. And I think Dallas is talented, and I think any given year Dallas could win the division. But this is not a division where if you just so happen to rise up and be good, it guarantees that it's your year. Because at any given time, the NFC East, I think, could field 3 legitimate teams. And then market and brand, this is also a 5. I promise they're not all 5s, but these first few are just important teams, like in the landscape of the NFL, where obviously they're the Cowboys. They're the most relevant brand in the NFL. They have the biggest fan base in the NFL. It's a positive and a negative on some front, except Jerry Jones is a patient owner. Like, contrary to popular belief, the Cowboys are not an impulsive organization. So despite the fact that if it goes wrong, it'll get loud, the Cowboys usually aren't quick to fire. So I think that it doesn't work too bad as a negative, as we'll talk about with another team. So overall, I have the Cowboys at 21 out of 30, and they are my second best job because I understand the jokes. I really do. But if we really break it down on an objective level of are you going to have an opportunity to succeed, you will have the opportunity in Dallas. It's not like you're one of these teams that we're going to get to here in a couple minutes where it's like they just never know how to get it together. The Cowboys know how to be a playoff team and be close. And if you're a great coach, maybe you can take them that extra step and you just get them more honed in and disciplined. But I think this is a job where it's talented. The worst thing about it is the cap space because it just makes it tough to sustain and build moving forward. But other than that, and if as long as you just are on the same page with Jerry Jones, I think this is a good job to have. Up next, Jacksonville Jaguars. Roster, I'm giving this a 3 because it's complicated with Jacksonville. I would say that roster-wise, most of their talent's on their defense. I like their linebackers. Their defensive line is good. Josh Hines-Allen's a very good edge rusher. Trayvon Walker's not great, but he's serviceable. Like, he's a good player. Corners are good. Tyson Campbell dealt with some injuries this year, but he's a good player. Andre Sisco's a safety. He's a free agent, and I think he's really one of the only free agents that Jacksonville would want to retain. But if you're able to, he's a good safety. So defensively, they got some good talent. Offensively, it's a little more murky, where Brian Thomas Jr. is obviously a very good player. He had a great rookie year, and he did this despite a tumultuous situation around him. Offensive line, I don't love it, but maybe Anton Harrison will evolve into a good tackle in his third year. Usually between the second and third years where you see a big jump for offensive linemen if there's going to be one. And then Walker Little played at left tackle. I don't know if you want him to be your starter going in, but potentially he's like a stopgap guy. And then I don't love the interior all that much. Brandon Sheriff is potentially on like the verge of retirement, and I think that offensive line could use some work. Running backs, it's not awful, but I don't think you Travis Etienne as somebody that's going to be there forever, especially given that you'd probably have to pay him, and you'd pay him soon. So I think you're probably looking for another answer there. Depth at receivers is the other question. And then the big one is quarterback. So I think that whoever takes this job, you'll get a very good assessment of what the NFL thinks about Trevor Lawrence. Because if you believe that he's the guy, this is an attractive job. If you're not sure, then it's not, because then you've paid somebody that a lot of league doesn't believe in, and you've paid him a lot of money. So I think whoever takes this job, we're going to get a really good read on what the consensus around the league is on Trevor Lawrence. So that's the roster, because that quarterback is either positive or negative, so it's going to be right in the middle. Ownership, I'm going to give them a 3 also, and part of this is they kept Trent Baalke as GM. First and foremost, I don't like Trent Baalke as a GM. I don't think he's a good GM. He does unconventional things to the point that it's ridiculous, especially in the draft. He drafts for traits. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you get Brian Thomas Jr., but usually you end up picking Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. And I think that he's also survived so many coaches in different cities. Take San Francisco, for instance. He was there for Jim Harbaugh, Jim Tomsula, and Chip Kelly before he got fired, and then John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan came in. Then in Jacksonville, he's there for Urban Meyer, and then he's there for Doug Peterson, and now he's here to hire another coach. If you're a coach going into that situation, that's scary, because it means that no matter what, this guy is finding a way to pin all the problems on you. He's in the owner's ear being able to say things like, oh, well, look at the talent we got. Look at all these things we got, because he drafts traitsy guys. And he says it's all on you, and he somehow survives and is allowed to stay and make another crappy roster. So I think the presence of Trent Baalke is a huge problem for this job. And if I was Shad Khan, I would have fired him before I fired Doug Peterson. And frankly, I would have fired them both. But I think the fact he did that is a huge red flag. Now, is he willing to spend money on the roster? Is he willing to trust the people that he hires? Yes, and that's good. But that Trent Baalke thing scares the hell out of me if I'm somebody coming in, because I know that he's not going to have my back. I know that he has his back, and the accountability between the head coach and the GM is not equal in Jacksonville. Cap space. This is also a 3, where they are basically dead center. They're 17th with $27.9 million effective cap space. Not awesome, not terrible. Like I said, 3 right down the middle. Would you like more money to rebuild a team that's sort of perennially awful? Yes, but I don't think that there's a ton that you could do about it. Given that they just extended Trevor Lawrence, and I think that the good news is some of these guys that they've paid, their contracts are almost up, and I think it's probably best that they let some of these guys walk out of the building. Draft pick. That's a 5. 5 out of 5 right there. They have the 5th overall pick. Much like the Patriots, they're going to be able to get a premier, or at least a premier talent at that spot. And I think the answer in terms of who they draft is watch the combine and tell me who measures and tests the best, and that's who Jacksonville is going to draft. I don't think they care too much about the film stuff. If you are among the top prospects by consensus, and then you're super athletic in general, you're a Jaguar. So I think that the draft pick is good, but I don't trust the people making the pick. And then the division. That's a 5 out of 5. You can't ask to be in a better division than the AFC South. I understand the Texans could be relevant. I think that they are still building and could be overtaken at any given time if you make a good leap. The rest of the division, the Colts and the Titans, I don't think you really have to worry about them right now. I think the Colts, the Anthony Richardson thing, I don't think it's going to work. He can make a big leap, but I would believe in it a lot more if it wasn't that it seems to be maturity issues rather than like technique issues. But that seems to be what it is in Jacksonville or in Indianapolis. And Tennessee just has a long way to go. It's a complete rebuild. And then the market and brand in Jacksonville, that's a 1. It's probably the least relevant team in the league on the whole. Yeah, real small market, not a lot of history, not history of winning. I suppose the good news is low pressure job in a lot of ways, and if you win a few, seasons, they're going to build you a statue in Jacksonville if you have like 3 10-win seasons. So overall, I have that job at 20 out of 30, and I have it as my 4th best job. So up next, the New York Jets. Roster, this is a 3. Main reason, quarterback thing's really weird. They're super talented, but they could use some youth along certain spots. Offensive line, they could use some youth. Defensive line needs to be revamped. But so the trenches need work, and the quarterback position is completely unsettled. But other than that, they're obviously talented. Ownership, that's a 1, baby. Anytime you have an owner who's letting his sons make decisions because of Madden, you have a huge problem. So whoever takes this job, I feel like it's not somebody that has options. Especially, I think somebody who even takes the GM job, it's not somebody who has options. Woody Johnson is clearly such a problem in that organization, and nothing you can do about it. Can't fire the owner. Cap space. Jets, I gave them a 3. They have, they're 21st in effective cap space. Which is 15.2. So it's a little bit on the low end, but it's not so low that they're over the cap and have a lot of work to do to get back. Draft pick, that's a 5. I believe it's the 7th overall pick. And the Jets are it's right at the back end of where the blue chip guys will go. So theoretically, they should still get one. So that's a 5. Division, that's a 3. Now, I know you're saying, but that's the AFC East. That's where the Patriots are. You gave that a 4. Yes, however, I believe the Patriots are just a more competent group than the Jets. And I don't think the Jets can look at anybody in that division and say, we as an organization have the infrastructure to be better than this right now. I think the Patriots have a faster track to being good than the Jets. So I think this is a little bit tougher for the Jets. And then market and brand, I gave them a 3. And I know what you're thinking. New York, biggest market. It's important. I mean, and yes, and the fact that it's New York and it's a huge market is why it's a 3. The brand thing, you're the baby brother. Like, you're like the little brother in New York. People in New York really care more about the Giants. But here's the other reason why it's a 3. There are certain markets that seemingly take pride in the fact of, like, you can either hack it here or you can't. Like, you can either thrive here or you can't. I think that the fact that they're in New York and there's so many people talking and it gets so loud and you have an ownership situation that clearly listens to that kind of noise, I think it actually works to your detriment because it applies so much more pressure than what's even reasonable that being in such a loud market with that owner, you're in danger of getting fired faster. He's given some people some time, but I think being in New York equally works against you as it does for you if you're a bad team. And so I think that's why it's a 3. And as a result, I have the Jets at 18 out of 20, and they are my 7th ranked job. They're the job out of all of them that I wouldn't want despite the roster, because I don't see the path, unless you're telling me Woody Johnson has had a come to Jesus moment and he's just like, I will do what you say, I'm going to get out of the way. Unless that happens, I think the Jets are in a tough spot in terms of just their infrastructure. Raiders roster, that's a 1. They got Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins on the defensive line, so that's all right. But other than that, nothing really on defense. Offensively, the offensive line's not horrible. It's not premier, but it's decent. Brock Bowers is elite, and that's it. No quarterback, not much to speak of in terms of receivers or running backs. Not a great secondary. I think Spillane's a good linebacker, but I'm pretty sure he's a free agent, so it depends on if you retain him or not. So the Raiders don't have a whole lot of players I would want. Ownership, I'm giving that a 3. Mark Davis isn't somebody who's known to be a great owner. However, it seems like ever since they moved to Vegas and they became a lot more profitable than they were in Oakland, and they've had more money to spend, he's been willing to spend more on the team, which is why this isn't lower. It's also not a 4 or a 5, though, because I don't know completely who really is the voice of that organization. Obviously, Tom Brady is doing a lot of work in terms of interviews, and I would be very, very, very curious as to who's going to make the ultimate decision as to who is going to be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. So I would say that the ownership situation seems to be a generous group in terms of they're willing to spend the money on stuff, but I don't know who ultimately is the voice that we're listening to and reporting to. Cap space. That's 5 out of 5 right there. The Raiders have a cap space of $85.7 million, which is second in the NFL. So that's a very good place to be in terms of rebuilding. You have the ability to bring guys in as long as you spend wisely. In terms of the draft pick, that's also a 5. They're the 6th overall pick, which is right in that range to be able to get the kind of player that you would really want. And then the division, that's a division that I'm putting at a 2. Here's the main reason. Number 1, Kansas City's in there. And do I think that they're going to win the division every year forever? No. But you do have an odds-on favorite to win that thing every year. And then the Chargers, Justin Herbert, Jim Harbaugh, year 1 made the playoffs, and they are on the ascent. Broncos, Sean Payton, Bo Nix, year 1 together, on the ascent, made the playoffs. Why is this not a 1? I need to see the Broncos sustain success before I can say I know that they're going to be good for a while. But if the Broncos are good again next year and the Chargers are improving and like everybody's just improving, the Raiders are sort of firmly entrenched in last place for a while, which is a scary place to be. So this is a 2 that could really be a 1. I just need to see one more year out of Denver to really know what I'm dealing with there. And then market and brand, it's a 3. The Raiders are a historic brand, and by themselves, they're a 3. However, Vegas is a new market. They've been a bad team, so they're not able to really get a really firm foothold yet in terms of like really commanding the respect and interest of people. So it's a 3 that, because they're sort of this wandering franchise between a few different cities, they don't quite have the massive fan base in Vegas yet. So overall, 19 out of 30. I have this as my 6th rated job. And in large part, I would say, it's because, although I like the draft pick, you probably won't get a quarterback, and then the division that they're in. But other than that, I think that there's a lot to do to make the Raiders better and more relevant. But I think it just is probably going to take a little bit more time than people would like. And then last up, in terms of the openings, the New Orleans Saints. So, roster, 3. They're a weird roster because I think they have a few players that are good and young. However, I think what this roster really needs is to get ripped down to the studs and rebuild it. And we'll get into why in just a few minutes. I think that if you really want to try to convince yourself that you're relevant, maybe you can be a middling level team. Chris Olave is a really good player as long as his concussions aren't something that is going to cut his career short. Um, but other than that, not a whole lot. When the offensive line was healthy this year, they were good. So I guess there's that. But beyond that, there's not a ton there, especially in terms of young talent to really get excited about. Ownership, I'm giving them a 3. I think that they're just they're not a bad group. They give people they're a patient group, but I think that they have a completely incorrect perception of their team and their situation. And I think that they don't have a traditional structure in terms of really like bringing in a GM. The same guy's really been the GM of the Saints for about 20 years. And you have to be okay with that. The fact that the GM is basically never really in danger, and it's usually just the coach. Cap space, that's a 1. They are dead last in the NFL in cap space, and it is a staggering number where the New Orleans Saints are over the cap by $57.75 million. Now, I know we hear that and we panic. However, New Orleans is a team that does that quite a lot. They almost treat it like a credit card where they spend and then they pay it off, they spend, they pay it off. Now here's where that becomes problematic. They're not often able to bring in players because of that. They're so focused on having to restructure and extend guys and push money down the road that they're almost never able to really improve this roster in free agency. And I think that this right here is the reason that they need to tear it down to studs. You're still paying people and trying to act like Drew Brees and Sean Payton are walking through that door. They're not. They don't have a quarterback like Drew Brees. They don't have a coach like Sean Payton, obviously. But what they do have is the opportunity to tear it down and reset. And I think if they just embrace that, this is a job that could turn around pretty quick. You just have to get out from under all this dead money. Like, figure out the contracts to restructure or pre or post June 1st cuts where you gain back cap space and go about it like that. And I just think it's time. And as long as you can get this ownership on that page, this is what I'm talking about, the perception of the team. As long as you can get them to understand where they are in their life cycle as an organization, I think that this could be all right. Draft pick, that is a 4. The Saints have... which pick is it the Saints have? I completely drew a blank on that. The New Orleans Saints have the 9th overall pick. Yeah. So like I said, that sort of 9 to 15 range is the 4 spot. They could get a good player that falls there, but it's a little bit on the fringes. So I'm calling that a 4. Division, that's a 5. NFC South is the easiest division in the league to win year in and year out. Even easier than the AFC South because CJ Stroud isn't in the NFC South. Carolina's rebuilding. There's some optimism there with Bryce Young, but Carolina's still a little bit away. Buccaneers are good, but I do think there's a cap on their potential. And then Atlanta is just this odd mix. And who knows? Next year will tell us a lot about Atlanta. Talented, Michael Penix Jr. will get a full year to start, and that'll tell us a lot. But the Saints just keep sort of staying in mediocrity in a division that's just begging to get seized. It's like it's a frustrating thing to watch. And then market and brand. This is a 3. New Orleans isn't a huge sports market. In the NFL, it's sort of perceived more highly than it is in most sports. But it's not a big city. And the Saints, other than Drew Brees and Sean Payton, are not a hugely successful franchise. There's a reason there's not a whole lot of interest in the NFC South. They're a respected brand, but not one that people immediately think of when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So I ranked the Saints as the 5th best job. So I ranked them Patriots, Cowboys, Bears, Jags, Saints, Raiders, Jets in terms of desirability. And then as for the candidates, we'll get Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson out of the way. So experience, Mike Vrabel, 5. Connections, 5. X's and O's specialty, that's a 3. And then leadership, 5, upside, 5. Now, why did I do that for each of these? Experience, 5. He's a head coach that has experience as a head coach, and not only as a head coach, as a successful head coach who took a team in the Tennessee Titans that has its own level of dysfunction and took them, despite being less talented and not having a quarterback, to a number 1 seed. They beat the Baltimore Ravens. I believe there was a season where in that season they beat the Ravens, Bills, Chiefs, and 49ers when they were all good. And when they were not better as a team roster-wise than any of them. Mike Vrabel has an ability to make you punch above your weight class. And in his press conference in New England, I think we got a little bit of an insight as to why. Number 1, he seems to really care about the players. He seems to really understand knowing why they tick. But he also talked about there's a few things that they're going to do. Number 1 is they're going to be able to capitalize on bad football. If you just do that, you can win a lot of games. But also he talked about how we could have a lot of things we want to do, but we have to assess our roster and watch them as we go and really figure out what we can do. And if it's not a lot and it's not everything that we want to do, then we're just going to become damn good at what we can. So he's not the type of coach that is so rigid that he's only going to want to do his stuff. So I think that experience with Tennessee is going to translate to New England. And connections, 5 also. He's been in multiple organizations. He's been in Ohio State. And I think that he's just a well-connected coach throughout this league as a result. X's and O's specialty. He's not somebody who's known as an X's and O's guru. And if he is, it's more on the defensive side of the ball, which is not necessarily the side of the ball that you always want. However, I do believe that given his style of coaching, that's not the style you're hiring. You're not hiring the guy that calls all the plays. You're hiring the guy to understand the building, to be a great leader, to manage everything and be able to hire and replace when people are taken. Leadership, that's a 5. If you're taking teams that don't have talent and you're pushing them beyond their limits, it's because they're willing to fight for you. And it's because you've been able to make them believe in themselves, even when the odds are stacked against them. And that's leadership to me. Upside, also 5. If you're able to get Ryan Tannehill to an AFC championship and a 1 seed, I give you $120 million, a top 5 pick, and Drake May in 3 years. I would say New England is a playoff team and a contending playoff team. So overall, I had Mike Vrabel as a 23 out of 25 candidate. Ben Johnson, the other candidate just hired. Experience, gave him a 4. Connections, 3. X's and O's specialty, 5. Leadership, 5. Upside, 5. Experience, he's been an offensive coordinator for a while, but hasn't been a head coach, so I can't give you the full marks there. Connections, 3. He hasn't been in that many organizations in the NFL. It's been the Dolphins and the Lions. He's essentially been with Dan Campbell wherever he's gone. So he's got connections in some places, but it's within really 2 organizations. X's and O's specialty. Offensive coordinator for a long time. There's a reason he's so touted. If you watch the Detroit Lions offense, I mean, I understand people are going to say, oh, look at the Washington game. Yeah, cool story. But there's a reason that everybody watched this and was like, there's some plays that they run that are super creative and well done. And I think that as a result, Ben Johnson's the type of candidate that you view in sort of the McVay, Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell kind of light when he talks about like when they were hired. Leadership, I'm giving this a 5 for one reason. I don't know much about him in terms of how he talks and things like that. But in order to take a team that was so downtrodden for so many years and get these guys to believe in themselves and believe that it's all going to change, you have to have an entire coaching staff full of guys who can make people believe in what you're doing. And as a result, I'm going to give Ben Johnson high marks because in terms of turning around teams, the Lions are about as tough as anybody, as any franchise could have been. Like if I was breaking down the Lions in that segment before Dan Campbell got hired, they would not have been graded highly. But they did a great job there. Obviously, most of that falls at the feet of Dan Campbell, especially in terms of who gets credit. But make no mistake, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, when we get to them, they both deserve credit as well because they really are hands-on with each side of the ball, and they got to get all those guys to buy into the program. Then upside, 5. We've seen with this type of coach, if it works, if he's able to handle the extra responsibility and still keep his offense to that level, you're talking about a team that can contend at any time as long as they're healthy. And I think that when that's the upside, that's the most you can ask for. So Ben Johnson, I got at 22 out of 25, and those were the two that I would consider the best candidates. And it makes sense, I guess, that the best two candidates went to some of the top three jobs that I thought were available. Aaron Glenn. So experience, 4, connections 4, X's and O's specialty 4, leadership 5, upside 4. So experience, once again, hasn't been a head coach, but he was a player, which I do think is a very good thing. Connections 4, once again, really only been in a few organizations, the Saints and the Lions in particular. He does have connections from being a player, which stretches back to the Jets as well, and the Saints. X's and O's specialty 4, because he's a defensive coach. And whether or not we like it, and I don't, I prefer offensive, I don't really prefer offensive players or anything like that. I prefer defensive players, teams with a hard-nosed, tough identity. So I like guys like Aaron Glenn as coaches. But if you just look at the results of the modern NFL, objectively, it's tougher to succeed if you don't have the offensive guy. Leadership, giving him a 5 as well, because if you just look at this year, and once again, you throw the Washington game aside, they were ravaged by injuries, but they stayed competitive. They had a few elite games in them despite their injuries, and that takes great leadership from Aaron Glenn. And I think this does go back to him being a player. He understands what they're thinking. He understands what they're going through, and I think that is a very good thing. And then upside 4, and that only is just because if you look at the evidence of where the coaches that are in and have won the Super Bowl and are in the playoffs and stuff like that, most of them are offensive guys. But other than that, I think he's an outstanding coach. So I gave him a 21 out of 25. Mike McCarthy. Experience 5, connections 5, X's and O's specialties 4, leadership 3, upside 4. So, experience and connections. He's obviously been a head coach in multiple places, but he was an offensive coordinator all throughout the league before that. And I believe that he's going to be somebody who's going to be getting a job off of those connections. But in terms of experience, he's a winning coach on the whole, and I think that he's a very stable coach. X's and O's specialty. He's an offensive coach, but the reason he's not a 5 is just because it feels like he's not the most creative. The criticism of the Cowboys' offense has been they run basic concepts, and if you can just sort of figure it out with the patterns and stuff like that, you'll be able to shut them down. He's on the right side of the ball, but he doesn't seem to maximize it. Leadership 3. There's a reason why everybody sort of thinks he's bland and isn't particularly inspired just upon hearing him talk, and he sort of lives on cliches. It's because he's not naturally a super light the spark in somebody type of guy. He doesn't seem to be the type of guy that people want to run through a wall for. And then upside, I'm giving that a 4 because I think that he can stabilize your organization, and if you guys get lucky in terms of drafting, you can obviously win a Super Bowl because he did in Green Bay. But if we're playing the odds, he's not the kind of coach who you want to be going against the best coaches in a division or a conference. He's a good coach, but you'd be at a little bit of a disadvantage there, I would say. Up next, Liam Cohen, offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay right now. Experience, give him a 3, connections 3, X's and O's specialty 4, leadership 3, upside 4. And a lot of these are lower just because we don't know a lot about him because he's only been in the offensive coordinator spot for 1 year. He's been with the Buccaneers and the Rams, which I think that's good. That's good. Connections, if you're talking about connections within the Rams organization, I think that's a good place to be. But once again, because he's so new to being in a prominent role, it's really sort of tough to evaluate him. All we can tell is that we like where he is on offense, which is why the X's and O's specialty is where it is. I can't put it at 5 because I haven't seen a sustained run from him, of being this guy. But through 1 year, I really like what I see. And if there's a team that falls in love with him, I believe that he's the kind of guy that could be really, really good. In fact, I've talked myself into calling him a 5 upside guy instead of a 4. Because I believe it's all there. It's just inexperience. And it's just a lack of sample size in terms to evaluate upon. So, number 3, leadership. Once again, we just don't know. Tampa Bay is talented on offense. Dave Canales got hired off 1 year coaching that offense last year. Liam Cohen could get the same thing. It's tough to tell where he's elevated, though, in comparison to Dave Canales. And as a result, it's just sort of tough to gauge the intangible. This is something where you'd be able to tell much more in a meeting, I would say, and getting face-to-face with him. But it's just tough to gauge because Tampa Bay has been so stable in terms of offensive personnel that he hasn't had to get to do too much to draw something extra out or rebuild something or reshape something or anything like that. He sort of just, Dave Canales got out of the driver's seat, he got in, and he kept the car on the road, and he kept it as a well-functioning offense. But in terms of upside, I'd say he's a 5 because first year in the job, they're a good offense. Baker throws for 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns. I think there's high upside there. I just don't want to get too ahead of myself after 1 year. So I'd say he's an 18 out of 25 candidate, and a lot of that is just, as I said, we just don't know. We don't know how sustainable he is. But if it was up to me, I'd say he stays in that role for 1 more year. But would I be shocked at all if he got hired? No. Up next, Joe Brady. Experience 4, connections 4, X's and O's 5, leadership 4, upside 5. So, experience. The only reason he's got any mark on this ahead of Liam Cohen is he's at least been a head coach. He was the head coach at LSU for Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and that also helps with the connections thing. He's been connected. He'll be a little bit more connected in programs like that are sending high-end talent to the NFL. As well as being connected within the Bills organization now as the offensive coordinator there, you're in the proximity of a winning bunch, which I think is a good thing. Connections, as I said, for it's the same thing because of all that. I think experience and connections often are tied together, and I think his are intriguing. X's and O's specialties. I've given him a 5 because when he took over the job, it was when the Bills were reeling on offense and having to fire Ken Dorsey. And he came in and turned it around, and it immediately became really strong, really fast, and it stayed on track. They got rid of Stephon Diggs in the offseason. They have lesser talent, but higher function, and I think a lot of that, obviously a lot goes to Josh Allen, but the fact that Joe Brady was able to facilitate that is an impressive mark. Not to mention, you go back to the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, LSU thing. Obviously, we know now how talented they were, but he was there the year that those guys all exploded and broke out and won a national championship. So I think that that's a huge thing for them. Leadership, I'm giving him a 4 because as much as I like what he's done, there is an element of you have Josh Allen. How much do you really have to lead, and how much are people really just relying on the fact that, hey, we have Josh Allen? So I think he's a good player and a good coach, and he's been in prominent roles. So I don't think he's a bad leader, but I think when you have an alpha quarterback like that, it's a little tough to gauge how much you're actually having to do it and how much they're actually providing for you. And then upside 5. He's been successful everywhere he's gone in a prominent level. And I'd say that he's the kind of guy that if you think you have a good quarterback, pull the trigger. Go for it. Why not? Would I like if he stayed another year in this role? Yes. Because I think that would just be good for him. But I also understand the desire if that's what you would want. So I have him as a 21 out of 25 candidate. Then the last one I'm going to go over here that's getting looks is Brian Flores. Experience 5, connections 5, X's and O's specialty 4, leadership 4, upside 4. Experience and connections. Been a head coach before at Miami, and the Dolphins were good. They were solid. They were trending upwards when it fell apart for other reasons, which we will address here in a little bit. But he's a head coach that shows he can lead an organization. He can pull it together and manage the whole thing. Connections. Been within several organizations, obviously. Minnesota right now is the defensive coordinator. He was with the Patriots before, head coach in Miami. And I want to say he had a stop in Pittsburgh right after Miami. But I might be going crazy. Let me see here. Nope, I was I was not wrong. So he was in Pittsburgh right after Miami. It wasn't as a coordinator, but it was as like linebackers coach and a senior defensive assistant. Um, so he's well connected within several organizations. X's and O's specialty. It's a 4 because he's a defensive coach, but defensively he's one of the best coaches you can get. The Vikings are not super talented on their defense, but god damn it, they made it tough for everybody that plays against them. They're super confusing. They're super multiple. Good at disguises. Even though they don't have talent, they were able to play a lot of man coverage, a lot of zone coverage. Like, they were able to do it all and do it all well. And a lot of that has to go to Brian Flores. Leadership. I thought about making this a 3. But I do believe he's a good leader. But we have to talk about why things fell apart in Miami. Like, he wasn't being agreeable with anybody, and it wasn't, like, going well. It's obviously well documented. The reason that Tua felt he couldn't succeed is he didn't feel Brian Flores believed in him. He said Brian Flores berated him a lot, didn't like treat him very well. Do I believe that Flores is a smart enough guy to adapt to that and learn by his next job? Yes. But I do think that has to be noted as like just going in, it's something to monitor. And then upside 4, once again, love him, but he's a defensive coach, and if we're just playing the odds here, defensive coaches, they don't usually, hit that high. Unless I've seen you do it and like hit the Final 4 range like Mike Vrabel, I'm a little more hesitant to just concede that. And then I did have some like upside, like outside the box candidates, but given the way that the jobs broke, I think there's really only one that we need to talk about, which is Bill Belichick. There's a reason that name keeps getting floated out there as like somebody could buy out that UNC contract. Has he even signed the UNC contract? And so as a result, I feel I should just break him down. So experience and connections, it's 5 for obvious reasons. Been a head coach forever, maybe like the most successful ever. And then connections, obviously connected all throughout the league. X's and O's, I'm giving him a 4 because he's a defensive coach. Is he one of the best defensive minds to ever be on the sidelines? You bet your ass he is. But this is the current era of football that we are all cursed to be in. Leadership, giving him a 4 here. Unless I see that he's able to get outside of his ways a little bit, this is his biggest drawback. Is he somebody that the game has passed him by? Because of, like I said, like just the game is officiated different. The game is legislated different. Teams have to be built different. And that was a problem in New England. He wasn't paying attention to bringing in premier positions. This would sort of be, if I'm bringing him in, I have to have a different GM. Or you have to prove to me and like really convince me that you understand what type of team is going to win today and not 10 years ago. And then upside 5. If it all comes together and you feel good about that he's learned and adapted, the upside is obviously 6 Super Bowl wins and 9 Super Bowl appearances. Like, it can be as good as it can possibly be if you feel that you're on the same page with him and that you guys are headed in like a singular direction. But I think that he's somebody that you'd have to understand where his ego's at before you do that. So last thing we're going to do here is I'm going to give the ideal match for every organization here. So obviously, Bears and Patriots are off, and they actually got the guys that I thought were ideal for them. So good for me. New York Jets, I got Aaron Glenn. He's somebody who actually wants to be there because he was with the franchise, and I think that is hugely important because right now a lot of these premier candidates are not wanting to talk to the Jets. I think that having somebody like that who really could want it is huge. And given what he's shown with the Lions, I think that could be a great fit. If they don't get him, I would love Brian Flores there. Once again, toughness. He's from New York too, so I think that would be a good one. The Saints, ideal fit, Mike McCarthy. The Saints need to just become stable again. They need to get a good read of their organization and then just get on the right track. And I think that in terms of the Saints, you can't do much better than Mike McCarthy. He's been there before. He was as an offensive coordinator. And I think that'd be a good one. If they can't get him, they should be making a run at Aaron Glenn. Because once again, former player there. He like also coached there for a bit, and he's already interviewed with them as well as the Jets. So I think if they can't get Mike McCarthy, Aaron Glenn's the direction they should look. Raiders. My top one here is Brian Flores. I think in a division where you're clearly behind the eight ball in terms of quarterback and talent, somebody who really instills toughness and a different approach to playing football could be your way to becoming competitive quickly. If you can bring in great like defensive talent or even good defensive talent and try to just find a way to get that quarterback situation solved, I think Flores could be very good for the Raiders. I also think personality-wise, he fits what the Raiders want to be. He also has the connection with Tom Brady from the Patriots days. My backup to this one was Ben Johnson because they'd sort of started to talk about it. But I think the other one that I would say here is Joe Brady. Jacksonville Jaguars. For this one, you take your pick between Liam Cohen or Joe Brady as the ideal fit. But offensive coordinator who's young, who you feel can tie to Trevor Lawrence, and whichever one I would give the job to is very simple. Which one believes in Trevor Lawrence more? It's like that's the main thing. I think that it's also who's okay with Trent Baalke. And that's why I'm not going to put an experienced candidate in this spot. Because I don't think a candidate that has experience is going to look at Jacksonville and Trent Baalke and say, I'm comfortable going there. I think this is somebody who it'll be their first shot at it. And if they're really good, then it's going to be fine. But if they're not, they're gonna be in line to have another opportunity down the road. And whichever one you don't hire, that'd be the backup. Either Liam Cohen or Joe Brady the whole way. Young, offensive mind, somebody who you can sell on the structure of the organization, and that's the path you go with. And then the Cowboys. This is where we get a little bit outside of the box. This is where I would say your best option to me is Bill Belichick. And here's the answer. Jerry Jones and Bill Belichick have talked kindly about each other throughout the years. I do think it's an odd fit, and that's why I'll give you my backup one here in a second for them. But I would say that if they can get on the same page, and if you can get both these guys to have the humility to say, clearly my way wasn't working, and that's why we're in this position to be like looking for a coach, then Belichick could instill discipline. Jerry could draft the players, because that's one thing Jerry's good at. Like, let Jerry draft the players, let Bill coach them, and just run the thing. And I think if you do that, you're looking at a real contender in Dallas. But you just have to get those two to be able to agree on who handles the draft, essentially. But then if you can't get that, I would say that the best backup plan, in my opinion, for the Dallas Cowboys, to me, this is a little bit more specifically Joe Brady. Because I think that you have a quarterback that you're set with, and you have a talented enough team that you have a good receiver. He obviously has known how to use a good receiver in the past. And I think that he's also a young enough coach that perhaps he'll be willing to acquiesce to Jerry Jones on some level. And whether or not you think that's good, who knows? But I think he brings an air of legitimacy coming from the Bills and having had connections to, Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, that I think that would be something that could get Cowboys fans excited. But those would be my ideal fits. So I know that was a long one. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hit like, hit subscribe. Thank you so much. Peace.